Compound versus isolation exercises. Should you do both? Let's chat about it.
Don't you want to look good naked?
So let's talk about some compound versus isolation exercises, the differences between the two, some pros and cons, and some examples of exercises that I implement for myself and my clients. The main difference between compound and isolation movements is really just going to be the number of joints and muscles that you're using. So with compound movements, they're generally going to be multiple joint and muscle movements. So think of squats, deadlifts, lunges, all of those are going to be using multiple joints and multiple muscles, versus isolation exercises are going to be more so those single joint exercises. So you can think of leg extensions, hamstring curls, things like that. With pros and cons between compound and isolation movements, it really depends on what your specific goal is. So is it sports specific? Is it to build muscle? So hypertrophy specific? We really want to start there. You always have to think about, okay, why am I doing this? What is my main goal? So if your main goal is to build as much muscle as possible, so hypertrophy training, there are different times to implement compound movements and isolation movements. One thing that I like to think about is if you are someone who is more of a beginner, it probably makes sense to start with those compound movements. And as you become more intermediate and advanced, definitely working in some more isolation movements can be beneficial. Because if we think about it, if you're a beginner, once you start training, you're gonna have those newbie gains. And what that means is that basically your body, when you start training, when you start lifting weights, it's gonna be new. It's a new stimulus to your body. So it's gonna just start slapping on muscle from all different areas, really no matter what you're doing. So definitely starting with those compound movements and building those up can be great. As you become more advanced, you wanna be a little bit more specific with the movements that you're choosing. And the reason for this is because you wanna make sure that you are focused on the specific muscle that you're trying to grow, and also to preserve fatigue. So if you're doing tons and tons of barbell squats and deadlifts and things like that, that can be very fatiguing, and you could be doing a lot of work and not actually targeting the muscle tissue that you're trying to target, right? So again, that can be great if you're new, if you have a lot of newbie gains ahead of you. But if you're more advanced and you're trying to, for example, grow your delts a little bit more or grow your quads a little bit more, it probably makes sense to focus in on maybe not the isolation specific movements, but incorporating some of those into your training and incorporating some more accessory movements as well. So I'm not saying to not do compound movements. You should definitely continue to do those, but you want to be a little bit more picky with the movements that you're incorporating, right? Because we don't want it to be where you're just doing a lot of work and you're not actually getting the specific reward that you want out of it. Some of my favorite compound exercises that I include in my training are going to be different variations of deadlifts, different variations of split squats to target both quads and glutes. And then I also really like machine squats, so things like hack squats or even the leg press. Those are going to be some of the compound movements that I focus on with my main goal of building muscle, and I am a little bit more intermediate to advanced level, so making sure that I'm incorporating those compound movements, but also adding in some isolation and accessory movements. So with those isolation and accessory movements, if I'm trying to isolate my quads a little bit more, I'll incorporate some leg extensions or maybe sissy squats. If I'm trying to isolate maybe my glutes a little bit more, cable kickbacks are great for that. Hamstrings, doing some hamstring curls, and of course biceps and triceps, definitely lots of isolation exercises with those, whether that's with cables or with dumbbells. Women, we believe